All right,
We're doing a middle panel?
Yeah,
Is that
we're
kind of
a
thing?
panel in the middle.
All right, we're the center panel.
So we are following the Google presentation with an Office 365 panel. We thought we'd make it kind of fluid, kind of fun, a little adaptive to what we saw before. We're not saying from this presentation that Microsoft is necessarily better than Google or vice versa. We're trying to give you some information on some of the similarities and differences and maybe challenges in adoption. So let's start with who you are and how you use 365 as a platform. Give a little background.
All right, so I'm Scott Allen Miller. I actually just accepted a new job, so I do different things than I did a week ago. But traditionally, I work with NTG, which is a global IT consultancy. We work with lots of platforms. We have been a Google partner in the past. What we found is that when compared to Office 365, customers were never interested. And so when looking at them side by side, we actually found that there was no point in supporting Google, so we moved away from it because the price comparison and feature comparison, Office 365 won out so often that we ended up doing an awful lot with Office 365. Not a reseller of any, so we support whatever there is. We come from a background of doing lots of small business around the world, and we work with a lot of different platforms. So we used to build platforms like this, not to this degree, obviously, no one does. But we used to build our own groupware. We used to build and host our own emails and instant messaging and all those different platforms and have to integrate them ourselves. So we used to be a competitor in this space, so that's kind of an interesting background to it all. But so lots and lots of Office 365 support over the years.
And Marc Stevens, and this is my account, so we obviously use Office 365. We actually hired NTG to do our migration from Exchange 2003, so that was fun. That step was, I think we went to 2 different temp Exchange servers in-house and then finally did Office 365. Wasn't that the plan? Was it 2007, then to 10, and then to 365?
I think you can go, but depending at the time, that might have made sense. Yeah, there's a couple things you can't leap straight into.
Yeah, we couldn't go straight. So.
You do at least once then.
Yeah. I know someone that I know just did it, and they were able to go to 2013, and then but it was like 2003, 2013, Office 365, I think.
Okay.
And I've recently gone backwards and added a 2016 server on site, so now we're set up with hybrid with 2016. So that's been interesting as well.
I remember that story from the SpiceCorps a couple of times.
Yeah, I've talked about it before.
So
everybody tried to talk me out of it. I was like,
let's talk about identity management, guys. They talked about Google has its own directory. They use a synchronization tool. What are you doing for 365?
It's used to be called DFW Sync. Now it's Azure AD Connect. So
Yeah.
we've got basically my new Exchange server syncs up, has Azure AD Sync on it, and it's synchronizing local Active Directory with Office 365. And it's password synchronizations, I think, about every 15 minutes or so, and the total, like a complete delta change of the directory is every 30 minutes or an hour or something like that. And it's never been an issue for me, so I'm not really sure how often it goes.
Federation?
Yeah, so you can do federation. So there's really 3 modes with Office 365. You can go native and simply skip all the old stuff, and this is very Google-esque, right? In the Google world, Google has their own directories, and you use that, and everything integrates, and that's really smart. So Office 365 offers the same thing, and under the hood, it's Azure AD, right? Which is not AD in any way. It's AD is just letters on the name. Do not make the mistake of thinking this is Active Directory, and it does not use Active Directory protocols on top, which is a big deal because people kind of assume that somehow they're getting Kerberos and LDAP pushed out to you. They're not. They're using SAML. Right? So it's a completely different model, it's a completely different thing, but it is a directory service. So if you want to work in that way, you can use just that. And that's what NTG has done for a long time. It's what the majority of our customers do. And it's for those who've watched my LANless talks, moving towards LANless mentalities that Google also pushes. This is how you do it in the Office 365 world. If you want to be kind of in that world, but not completely, you have the DFW or whatever it's called now, method, and this is literally you have Active Directory or something that looks like Active Directory on site, and you have your Azure AD. You always have Azure AD, it's what powers the system. When you do that, it literally syncs. It's pushing a sync process, so it's pretty straightforward. I make a change a few minutes later, it manually behind the scenes, there we go, makes the sync in the background. The third process is federation. This is where Azure AD and your on-premise AD are actually tied together as a single domain. One represents as LDAP and Kerberos, the other represents as SAML, and they talk all the time. The problems with federation include it's really complex to set up. It's really hard to separate, and when one goes down, the other goes down. It's like old-fashioned Christmas lights. When one light goes out, they all go out. The general rule of thumb is DirSync when you have to, Azure AD when you don't have to, and if you think you need to do federated, rethink everything you're doing. There's almost no legitimate case where you want to do it because it's scary, it requires a lot of people, and you have to depend on completely different failure domains, right? If you're going to depend on Azure AD, great. When it goes down, you have the Azure AD people to fix it. And when you have your own stuff and it goes down, you have you to fix it. But what's really scary is when it goes down, you have your own people who aren't sure whose fault it is, and they're not completely convinced it's their fault, or vice versa. And everyone's pointing fingers, and and it's this like who's responsible and when, and things will go down. But normally, when you go down, you get it fixed fast, and when they go down, they get it fixed fast. And when you both go down, that's when hours and hours start passing, and no one's sure who's down. So that's the scariest of scenarios. If you can avoid it by any way, do so.
And if you're using AD Connect, you can make a choice to synchronize all users and groups, or you can only synchronize certain OUs if you want, because that's what we ended up doing.
Yep.
We actually had a situation where the reseller we hired to help us do the migration created all the accounts in Azure AD before we got AD Sync going, and we're just now getting that going so that we don't accidentally push delete anyone with the sync utility. That's one problem. If you move somebody out of an OU that's being synced into one that's not, they just got push deleted from Azure AD the next time the synchronization runs. So what about plans, guys? What plans are you using in the 365 platform realm? Because you have things like SharePoint, OneDrive, Teams, Delve, and Sway, and all this stuff.
Most of our users are actually on E1, the Enterprise One. It's $8 a user. And then we've got, I think there's now 5 of us that are on E3. As I've been adding new users, they've been going, most of the last 4 people we've hired have been remote workers. They're working out of their house or out of a branch office, and they're using Horizon View for desktops. So instead of buying another Office license, I'm just getting them at E3, and now they get Office as well as the Office 365 license.
So internally at NTG, we're E3. We're E5 customers. But there's a lot of pieces we don't like and don't use. So we're really not using Delve. We never touch Sway. We don't use video. But what we do use a lot is SharePoint. We're on SharePoint all the time, but we do not use OneDrive for Business because Microsoft themselves actually lost all of our data. Actual Microsoft employees doing work blew away so one of the biggest risks of any system, of cloud systems, right, hosted systems that someone else hosts, one of the things that no one ever talks about, because people talk about what happens when my data center goes down, what happens when my WAN link goes down, and all these things are like, come on, like Microsoft can get a data center back up. You know, it might take them a few hours, they know what they're doing, right? Your WAN link, your ISP can fix it. You can go home and work, right? All these things are like kind of silly risks. Yes, we should think about them. Yeah, we can have a couple hours outage, you can fail over. What no one ever talks about, and it's the biggest risk, and I've seen conferences for Microsoft specifically, where they've had rooms full of Azure users, and they're like, we never go down, and the whole room's like, we've all been down. And the identity thing is, the thing that makes it different is that Azure itself, for example, in this example, doesn't fail. It's up. The failures happen at the account level. And account level failures, nobody talks about, but that's the fear, is when someone hoses your account on the back end, someone working and accidentally hoses your account, you don't exist anymore. Your support evaporates, you have no one to call, you can't prove that you're a customer. It's not just you know, you can have all the redundancy in the world, all of it goes away together, all of your customers go away with you. So your customers are calling you, they can't get through because everything's gone. This is the fear with any hosted service, that at some point your account is going to become corrupted, lost, confused. Someone working there in a concierge role decides to delete you, whatever. These fears are real. And that's what we had happen on OneNote. And we've met hundreds of consulting firms that have had similar things happen. That now, in most cases, they were able to bring it back eventually, but they were 100% outages where everybody involved with that account went out. What we've learned is that is much higher risk with consulting firms than with direct accounts. Just something on the back end, the way they treat it or something. That it's something like 1 out of 3 consulting firms have lost their accounts at some point. That we've been unable to retrieve our data. That Microsoft, it wasn't just that, it actually tied out to personal accounts, and they took those out with them. So like your OneDrive for business goes, and you're like, well, my OneDrive is gone. And it's because they're doing this account stuff. We're like, well, we merge it and it's all one thing, and oh yeah, we merged it wrong. And it's a thing. So that's why we don't use OneDrive. Internally we use Nextcloud for that. We like it a lot better. But SharePoint really is the big piece of the Microsoft ecosystem, right? If you're invested into Microsoft Office, if you're invested into Office 365, if you want to do stuff the Microsoft way, SharePoint is their linchpin, right? A lot of people think of it as, oh, there's Microsoft Server is kind of the Active Directory. That's not really true. In the Microsoft world, since about 2003, their vision of the Microsoft ecosystem is SharePoint. That's the core that everything connects through and to, and of course it doesn't handle its own authentication, so it reaches out for that. And it reaches out for its a database to SQL Server, and it does all these reaching outs, but the central hub that brings the Microsoft ecosystem together is SharePoint, and it does an amazing job. It's really complex to learn, but when you learn it with its workflows and its capabilities, it's awfully nice, and it's what takes all the Microsoft Office components and puts them together into ways that let you work live on documents with each other and share things and control security and do stuff in a landless way where you don't need those traditional things. And what's nice is with Office 365, you can get the web-based applications or the desktop-based ones, so you can work in an old mode with FAT clients installed on your desktop, or you can go to 100% web-based and do it kind of the Google Apps way, and you get those choices and you can mix and match by user or personality or device you're with.
Are you guys using Outlook, or are you having people use Outlook web app?
We're exclusively Outlook, basically.
Okay.
With the software systems, our agency management system and our document management system that we have to use, that everybody else uses except me, basically. It's integrated basically with Outlook. When it goes to email something out of our management systems, it creates an Outlook email. It opens up a new Outlook message, so it won't work if you're using the web-based version of Outlook. So we're stuck with that.
And on that same note, when you came to the Office 365 game, did you come for just email like we heard earlier, or were you?
I came for a couple things. I came for email. OneDrive was one of the things. Although, to be honest, not many people use it. We've got everybody with UDrive, user drives on a share file server, and they're all that's what they know to do, and they're sticking with that. I can't get anyone to move over to OneDrive.
Common story.
Yeah, since then I've started using Planner a little bit. I'm just a one-man IT guy, and it's either lots of notes on notepads or notes in OneNote or something like that, but now that I've found Planner, that makes it easier to map out projects for the future. And then I'd say within the last 2-3 months, we started using Teams quite a bit, which is Microsoft's version of Slack, if anybody has that. So
Teams is definitely cool stuff.
it's not quite up to Slack. There's still a few things that I wish it would do that it doesn't do. But for like video meetings and stuff, it's been awesome. We were using WebEx before, like somebody mentioned all the freaking code you got. And then we all would go into the conference room and jump on a conference computer, and then somebody would bring in a printed out version of their WebEx meeting. And now they're trying to type in that code that's a shortened URL, and they're not doing the caps right or something goofy, and the whole thing's a mess.
I always found the Java to be the thing that was the problem. That's a whole new problem that I haven't.
Well, this one particular, she's our underwriting manager, and she's the one that always runs the meetings whenever we're doing some like video meeting of some sort, and everything she does gets printed out on a paper. It's just, she's just one of those folks that if it's not paper in her hand, it doesn't exist. She could go in there and log into her email on the browser and just click the link, but no, she prints it out and walks down there with a piece of paper and tries to do it.
We're hybrid, so we're probably 50-50. It's mostly personal, right? About half people are like, I gotta have Outlook, and about half the people are like. So I'm a web access user. I like OA. It's a little bit slow sometimes, but mostly works pretty well, and I like not having to deal with the Outlook problems. So for me, well, and I don't run Windows desktops, so that may be a factor.
And I want to throw out real quick, we're probably at still about 50%. We still have 50% of our people that are probably still on Outlook.
On Outlook connected to Gmail?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh,
Was it
that's
IMAP?
even dumber. Oh,
But,
yeah.
but it's just, again, it's what people know, and that's
Yeah.
what they're gonna stick with. And I've got a handful of users that's like, I'm gonna use it until you literally take it out of my cold dead hand.
Which is in 2018, you said, right?
They're taking it or killing them?
They're killing IMAP.
Oh,
They're just
IMAP.
turning IMAP
Oh
off,
wait,
so the-
Gmail's turning off IMAP?
No, they
No,
are.
Oh,
they
you are.
Yeah.
No, you don't
Like,
like to turn
whoa,
on
that's
IMAP.
news! Holy crap!
Yeah, that was
You saw it here, folks.
I mean, that's the best practice in a lot of cases anyway.
Well, sure.
But
But we're doing it for licensing because we're running Office 2010 as a suite, and it's going to be coming end of life in 2020, but we're trying to get everybody off of it first before it end of life, and we're just not gonna invest in the next level. And that's all, that's the only reason that
Gotcha.
we're doing that.
we just have a couple of years to figure out if we made a mistake.
One thing that's cool about OWA, I found this out the other day, is they do have third-party plugins like for Citrix
Oh, yeah?
File and other things
Yeah.
that you can utilize just like the Outlook desktop line.
Mhm.
That was pretty cool.
Yeah, it's
I didn't
decently
know about
robust.
That, so I had to
Yeah.
figure it out.
They finally made our vendor that makes our agency management system, our document management system, finally made an OWA plugin for it, so we can import. That part can use Office 365 browser based, but the other half of our software still can't. Same vendor, so maybe they'll fix that one.
You can do some things in the opposite direction, just to tie back to a Nextcloud discussion we were having. You can take your email, pretty much anyone, as long as you leave IMAP on, tie it through Nextcloud, and Nextcloud will act as your email client, and then you can do attachments because it integrates all that built in. So that's kind of works with every email.
Are you guys doing any of the plans with archiving? Because there are some
So we
365
do.
plans with archiving, right?
Yeah, we do, and it's specifically only for executives. So we turn it on, like Danielle, right, our CEO. She has that turned on. Everyone else doesn't. So like mine, automatic deletion of stuff after a year. Because otherwise, I'd be lazy and keep it forever.
Ours is set to 10-year retention for everything,
Is that,
everybody.
Is that the equivalent of the on-premise advanced user count or whatever? Doesn't that do the archiving?
Probably.
There was a difference in the size, the archiving size between the E1 and E3, I think,
Ours is unlimited.
on the E5,
Yeah.
probably. The E3,
I think we get it at E3 though.
I was thinking maybe it's E1 is limited to 25 gigs and E3 is unlimited.
That sounds right.
Okay, I think that's what it is. So we do have a limit on the ones that are still on the E1, but I haven't come close yet.
And we do have things like the whole discovery and legal hold and all those tools inside.
All those
the-
tools,
Yeah,
which is
it's in the
why,
admin
which is why we lean towards policies of automatic deletion, so there's no legal discovery. That's why you do it.
I was thinking there was a B.
That's actually one of the things that we like a lot is that all of the staff we have a retention plan, and what most companies kind of think of is we have a retention policy, and it's like we gotta keep it 10 years, right? Gotta make sure we keep it 10 years. We have the opposite, right? And I think a lot of places should consider this, is ours isn't we gotta keep it 10 years, it's we gotta get rid of it in under 2. Right? The thing that we're focused on is getting rid of email. We don't want to be in a position where someone's doing legal discovery and we
you
don't
get
have a
drug into
policy,
it.
right? And suddenly we
Yeah.
get dragged into 20 years of emails. We're only a 20-year-old company, but we could, in theory, if we didn't have a retention plan, suddenly it's like, oh, okay, so we got some reasonable things. We moved off of a platform, we deleted everyone's email 15 years ago. Okay, lawyers are cool with that, but up to 15 years, you don't have a policy, you're still on the same platform, you gotta have it. And it's like, oh, gosh, this is terrible, right? Some huge expensive thing that, you know, one of our customers, and this happened, right? We just had a customer going to court. We didn't get dragged into legal discovery, but we could have, right? Because we're a consulting firm, and so all it takes is, oh, we talked to them, and they did, right? They talked to us about things in court. Could we look over paperwork for them and tell them what their court position is likely to be from an expert witness perspective? Not that we're the expert witness, what we feel an expert witness would tell them, right? So very reasonable stuff for us to have. We're the ones that are on the suing someone side of the equation, like nothing's wrong, but all it takes is legal discovery and suddenly it's expensive for us. And so those kind of things we want to at least cap, right? And useful stuff doesn't go back 15 years, but if someone does legal discovery, suddenly you're on the hook for it. That's if you can avoid it, it's nice to do so.
We have government entities that force us. I can't avoid it.
Yeah. Well, you'll probably also have government entities that pay for it when you go to court.
No.
Oh, well then.
God, no.
Did you have any issues with user adoption? I'm gonna guess maybe not that many, or?
We didn't, you know, for us, they were already using Outlook, so the client didn't change. It was just me having to go to each station and plug them into the Office 365. But for our users, pretty seamless. What has been an issue was getting, we've kind of wanted some folks that are management staff to be able to access their email anywhere they go, and getting them to understand you can just open up a browser and go to this link. Google it if you don't know what the link is anymore. Office 365 login.
What? I Googled it every time.
Or you
I
could-
have no idea what it is.
Or you could Bing it. Right?
Or you can Bing it.
I don't know if that works.
What is that?
Like
That's what you have to say. If you
somebody
work
at
for Microsoft.
Spice
Yeah.
World, one
That's
of the
locked in the
Microsoft
firewall.
sessions, the guy said, Google it using Bing.
I prefer to Bing it using Google.
Yeah.
It's kind of like an Internet Explorer when you talk to Google Chrome. Say, are you sure you don't want to use Microsoft Edge? I'm very sure.
Now, wait, have you seen they just
Edge
changed
is
this, I
kind of
think.
nice. I'll be honest, I actually like it.
I
actually like it.
It's terrible.
It might be contagious.
Hey, now, I'm
Didn't
using
they just-
Chrome.
Okay.
I use Chrome.
So I think it was just recently, at least it's the first I've noticed it, so I don't use Windows desktops, right? Let me tell you, move off of a Windows desktop and then you move back to it, and every moment is a painful reminder of how bad it is. You know, you're just like, holy cow. So I just did an office migration for a local company, and real quickly I was sitting there with their manager, and I'm complaining about Windows, and they're laughing because they want to move off, and I'm like, I just want to show this is a default install. There are 13 advertisements for not inappropriate, but like video games, things that are not business appropriate. 13 ads came up during the install process that there it is. And I'm like, Microsoft doesn't feel that you're a business, right? This is Windows Pro. Their feeling about their customers is something you may want to consider. That this is their view of their customers. But it was the thing that I just noticed was that now if you install Chrome and you fire it up the first time, Microsoft does a pop-up ad for Exchange over top of it. I haven't seen that before maybe a month ago. Yeah. It goes away after a bit, but they actually pop up over Chrome and are like, this isn't as good as Edge. You're like, not pretty sure.
Showing how fast it is. Yeah.
I'm like, yeah, I'm pretty sure it is.
And then when you change it from default browser on Windows 10, it says,
Are you sure?
Are you sure?
Yeah.
Sure. Yes.
And then you get an update and it pops it back.
Yeah.
So we have to have a group policy to force Chrome back in the console.
There's been a lot lately. There's been a problem. We've redirected you to Edge.
Of course. Or Edge becomes the default PDF viewer.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Always.
Did you have user adoption issues or any issues training people?
So internally, no, we had no problems because we're a technical company and we're coming from a lot of different email systems over the years, and most of us support different things for customers. So no. With customers, we always have a little bit because we're constantly in that position of training or introducing things, but really we've had very little. It tends to be customers use Outlook if they're used to Outlook, and we tend to advise away from people using Outlook if they've not used it previously, right? Don't introduce that technical debt for no reason. And those who are going to the web-based interface to OA generally seem to find it roughly equivalent to whatever web interface they were using before. So pretty much, and the one we just did this past weekend, it was pretty cool. I don't normally get to get my hands dirty. It was local, it was right up the street, so I got to do it, which was a nice like change of pace for the weekend. I did a full migration to Windows 10 and to Office 365. So it was a company coming from literally GoDaddy webmail and go into Office 365, and they were like, oh, new, it's default, hook it up in there, put it into their browser so they don't have to look it up. Other than that, they were ready to go.
Now there are some 365 plans that come with license to the Office suite. Others
Yep.
do not, right?
Correct.
Are you finding that most of your customers are getting the plan with the software, or no?
I would say 50-50. It's very popular to get it, but it's also very popular not to. And partially that I'm a big pusher of not, right? I'm a big fan of Office 365 as an email platform. I think they're really, really good, mostly for people who want Exchange, right? If what you want is Exchange, it's really hard to beat Office 365. It just is. But the number of times that people need those extra features is relatively low. So I tend to be a very big, get in with hosted Exchange, keep it there. It's a nice middle ground of not being overinvested. If you're a small business, they have the small business plans, I think are $5 or $5.50 a month, and gives you the basic suite and SharePoint, and you get a nice balance that's very similar to G Suite, without a huge investment at roughly the same kind of prices. Once you go to Enterprise, for those who don't know, the prices of Office 365 get a little bit high.
Are you guys using Excel, Word, PowerPoint online at all?
Online, not so much. The only time we do is if we're using Teams, because we've got some apps, or not apps. We've got some documents that we've put on there, and the main one that we use all the time that we're switching around is the phone list that we have.
Yeah.
So people pull up the. I'll show you guys. Our phone extension list, and you can edit it right out of.
Oh, that's cool.
It'll display it so you can see it, but then you can edit it as well from here, and it's the online version.
Mm-hmm.
When you click to edit it.
So I use the online version a bit because I don't run Windows desktops, so I have no Microsoft Office installed. So I kind of have to. But I don't actually work with Microsoft Office documents very often. So it doesn't really come up.
If I recall right, you can see the changes by various people at the same time.
Oh
the
yes.
same document.
Yeah, so one of the
Very
things
similar
that,
to what we saw.
right, the same kind of thing. This was one of the things that we use, for example, that functionality for, we like to use Excel online and this works with the non-online version too. As long as you're hooked through, you can do it with either one. It's just one's easier, because, but we do office migration projects. And this is one of my favorite examples. It was right when we first moved to Excel, so I don't know, 10 years ago. We were doing a 100-person office weekend migration, right? So 100 desktops being completely rebuilt in one weekend. Obviously, there's multiple people running around a building like crazy, right? So we had bench techs to manage, and we had the bench manager on site with Excel open and all the information about what was going on, and then we had off-site support with the same Excel open, looking at what was going on, and then there was an open phone conversation, and then people running around to each desk. The people who were at different desks would either run back and tell the on-site manager what the status was, or they would just open up their Excel on a web browser really quickly and update things. And all the people we coordinated through Excel, so people would sign in and say I just did this is the status. We had different cells that said what the things were, if something failed at some point. And so Excel, this is pretty simple, but it was a really powerful way to use this integration that someone would be like, okay, so you would just turn the cell green and be like, this task is done. Someone would turn it red and be like, okay, we got the OS installed, it's online, but now this step is installing Office, something went wrong, and the person who's off-site would see it go red, and the off-site team would log in and try to fix things so the people who are on site can run to another desk and keep things going. And so it was really, really effective, and everybody was on the same page. There was no crosstalk, and the people who were off-site would just put their name into the cell that was red and be like, I'm working on it, right? Or make notes right there. This is what the problem is, and we've seen it, and so it was all this coordination just in a spreadsheet. And of course, the G Suite will do exactly the same thing. It's just a really powerful way to, it's even today, having had these things for a long time, it takes a bit before you remember, oh my gosh, I could use a spreadsheet for that.
Okay. I'll only ask a few few more questions, so it's not to take up too much time. What about spam filtering? Do you find that the spam filtering that you get through 365 is good enough? Is it better than what you've used before? Worse? Do you supplement with something else?
We don't supplement. We used to use a McAfee product before, and when we switched, you guys, TG was the guy that helped us do the switch over. Said Office 365 spam filter is really good. Try it for a while. It wasn't you.
Oh, okay.
I didn't talk to you about our switch over at all.
That's
You
why
were
I didn't
busy.
know about it.
You were somewhere else. I don't know what you were doing. But he suggested try this for a while. If you start having problems, then look at other options. But we haven't had an issue at all. We every once in a blue moon we'll get an email with that's obviously a phishing email or obviously a virus because it's got a zip file that's Xerox, Canon. We get a lot of those, the ones that say they're from Canon fax machine or whatever. Here's your fax, but they're all coming from one of our clients, and so that's how they're getting through because they've been whitelisted. The email address is whitelisted, and they're coming from their actual. When I've looked at the headers most of the time, they are really coming from that client of ours. So he's got something on his computer that's sending
that's
out
not really
space.
spam. That's actually
a virus. Yes.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
We're the same. We use the built-in. We have pretty good luck with it. It's definitely not perfect. Nothing is, but the amount we see get through is very small, and it's relatively focused. But it's stuff that you might argue isn't spam, right? It's very very focused. So the one thing I know I get all the time is offers for funding. Right.
From Nigerian princes?
No, not looking for funding. People offering us money.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Oh, yeah,
But it's like,
bankers.
it's like a constant thing, and for some reason those don't get picked up by spam filters very well. Partially because they're not blasted, right? They really are targeted. It's like, we're sending this to you. It's more of just annoying email, not spam, technically.
Yeah.
So.
Biggest issue with the 365 spam filter is the daily junk notification. My sales team members would, if something gets quarantined,
Mhm.
you get a notification, but it seems to only be possible to send that once per day and not in real time. That's my biggest.
My biggest thing is
issue with
clutter.
Yeah, I'm about to say
Because you
clutter
can't turn it
confuses
off.
our. Yeah, you can.
No, you can't.
It doesn't turn off.
No. It'll turn off for about 24 hours, and silently it'll turn back on. I've tried it over and over again.
Okay.
And no matter what, they will turn on clutter. Luckily for me, my clutter picks up one email address, and it's spam. So every once in a while I look in there, I'm like, yep, it's still running after I turned it off several times. But at least it only catches this one thing.
I kind of like my clutter. It picks up some good stuff.
That makes you a hoarder.
Probably.
So last two questions.
Mhm.
Tell me the thing you like the most about the platform as a whole, either for yourself or for your users, and what was your biggest challenge in getting to 365?
I'm sorry, say that again.
What's your favorite thing and your biggest challenge?
Favorite thing about the platform, biggest challenge to getting there?
Favorite thing is I don't have now that I've got a hybrid again, I've got a server to maintain. That was the biggest thing. That was the whole point of going to it in the first place, was to get away from having a server to maintain. We had 2003, so I had to upgrade because we were, I think, a year past end of life even when we finally got off of it.
Did you have an issue with archiving? No archive?
At that time, we were doing local archives, so they were archived. Actually, I had set them all up to where they would go to their user drive, so they'd archive them in there. But that wouldn't work out real well if somebody logged into the terminal server and the U drive didn't pick up for whatever reason, or if they tried to use OWA. Now they can't get to their archives. I had a lot of that.
No issues with migrating archive there or?
No,
It's because NTG did it.
Yeah, he set up a script that pulled a lot of that
Yeah.
over. I say no. We did have one user that was very heavily using terminal servers on the weekends, and we finally found out she had 18 different PST archive files.
Wow.
And they were all 50K. They were tiny, but they all had like 10 emails. And that one she had to have that day, she couldn't find it. Well, I sat down one weekend and just combined everything into one PST, and she's got that on her U drive now. But that was the only real headache we had with archives.
Do you have a municipality that has a pretty large mail archive that they've hoarded, and that's right there with Intermedia in trying to get, and trying to get them moved from intermediate over to 365 has been a little bit challenging. That's one sense.
The other big issue I had 2 other users that had a problem deleting things. I wouldn't say deleted. They put things in the deleted items folder, but they never removed them. One of those users had subfolders in her deleted items folder to keep it organized.
Yes, we had that too.
Yeah,
Too much time on her hands.
and when we went to Office 365, she had a freak out moment.
Yes.
31 days later, when it automatically deleted everything out of her deleted items. But
Yeah,
I shrunk her archive PST file from 27 gigs down to like 4 gigs just by cleaning up that deleted items out of her archive.
We had to turn it on the domain, and we have people saying, I keep my stuff in there. And it's like, why do you keep it in trash? Why do you keep it in the deleted folder?
Yeah.
The same thing with recycle bin. I just get a habit of deleting it. Like, no. Like, what?
Yeah, we had to put a policy to
It's not-
clear it
it's
out,
not a
because
repository.
that was the
Yeah.
one thing, I delete religiously,
It's not a folder.
but they would never empty it.
Yeah. I could see how like the setup with Google where it was when you read it or you checked it off and it would just move it out of your inbox. That's all they really wanted to do. They wanted it out of their
Yeah.
inbox.
It's archived.
Yeah, that's
That's all that is.
Yeah.
It's there.
now, if you do put it in trash, 30 days it's gone, there's no discussion.
Yeah. Yeah.
So what kind of storage levels do you get with the 365?
It's 50 gigs per user.
Okay.
And then at some place, we think it's E3, you get unlimited archiving. So you have this option of, I want to have unlimited, but only 50 in my active inbox.
Yeah.
It gets pretty big numbers.
And does the 50 include any email plus attachments you might have in OneDrive, SharePoint?
No,
etc.?
anything
50
that's
gig is-
there, that's separate.
Yeah. The OneDrive is, I think, the E3 is a terabyte.
Sounds right.
E1, I think, is maybe 100 gigs. I don't remember. Or-
It's pretty big.
yeah.
Yeah, it's-
More than we're using. I
Yeah.
can't get anybody to use
And
it.
SharePoint itself remains pretty small, but that's not where you put the attachments, so it doesn't generally affect you.
How about you, Scott?
Favorite
Challenge?
things, my favorite things are the incredible amount of functionality that's all integrated in one platform that you have just nowhere else to go for everything. And it's pretty easy and robust to attach other things to it that you want to do. If you want to grow or build your own tools, you can really easily, and using stuff that people have used for a long time. The biggest problem with adoption is also the exact same thing. There's so many components that, for example, Yammer is a really cool platform. Like, it does really cool stuff. I can't get anybody to use it, right? I was the one person like trying to drive adoption. It's like, I'm gonna put data in here, I'm going, and everyone's like, oh, that's neat. I'm not gonna sign into that. And so we found that with a lot of the things, that there's too much functionality and people end up getting splintered, and one person's trying, so for example, just real quick, you can instant message in Mail, you can instant message in SharePoint, you can instant message in Teams, you can instant message in Yammer, you can instant message in Skype for
Skype
Business,
for
wherever it's
Business.
hiding. That's it.
It's not on it.
Oh, okay, so
Yeah.
Skype for Business is the thing that's meant to be the instant messaging.
I turned
So
that
it's
off.
not only, oh, you turned it, okay.
Yeah.
Good man, turn that crap off.
It is the
Um,
biggest freaking
it's
resource
garbage.
hog.
So the thing is that you have two official competing instant messaging platforms and about 4 competing unofficial ones that are like, well, we wanted to keep this here. And it's insane. And so if you're not careful, you will get into a position all within a single platform where you can't find the messages that people are sending to you. And that doesn't include Yammer's own thing that's separate from SharePoint's news feed. Those could have been integrated, and I know why they're not, because they bought these components and just shoved them together. But that they're all kind of integrated in a loose way is great. That they're not integrated in a tight way is the problem. Like, they should have made Teams and Skype for Business be 2 views on the same conversation, and then fed those conversations into some kind of like notification in Mail or whatever in Yammer, and that would have been really powerful and useful. And then making the Yammer news feed be the same one that shows up in SharePoint, that would have been really powerful and useful, and we probably would have combined those things and used them. But that we had to keep putting them into different places, and people weren't sure where the conversations went and which ones were which.
Obviously, no single point of search or anything else with that.
So they're starting to get into that. That's what Delve is supposed to be, but no one wants to use that. No one wants to search documents. Like if you're a document heavy company, some of the stuff's like really cool. But if you're not a document centric company, which we're not, it becomes really weak. So I think this might be a really kind of interesting viewpoint, right? And I came up with this on the spot, so no one hold me to this. I think that Office 365 shines best for companies that are at the very, very document heavy extreme side of the spectrum. They're traditional companies that work from documents, right? That's how they live. And I think G Suite kind of plays in the middle where they're good for servicing companies that have a lot of documents or use them but are not document centric. And I think neither of them play really great in companies that want to be fully vertically integrated and not use documents at all, or at least when they don't, as not part of their own internal workflow, right? If you really think about it, it's very often you don't need Word in-house, right? Word is kind of for integrating with other companies to do stuff. It's pretty rare that internally you need to make documents for normal business workflows. And so I think that that's kind of how they play. Microsoft really thinks of the world in terms of Word and Excel. It's like, how do we present you Word and Excel and let you search Word and Excel? And Google's like, okay, we want to support that, but we're not all about that. And then vertically integrated companies are like, yeah, we're just going to give you a database and the data.
Okay, so if I may, I'm going to answer my own question as well.
Okay.
So one of my favorite things is this idea of the shared mailbox, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you have people that leave the company, if you want them to no longer take a license, you can make them a shared mailbox. That mailbox will still receive mail, it can still send mail, you can give people access to it, but it doesn't take up any kind of license as far as your 365 compliance goes. Love that. I actually like number 2.
You have a similar functionality in Google as well.
Okay.
You do a shared mailbox kind of concept.
Cool.
It's great whenever they go on vacation.
The bad part about that is you can't get any managers to say, yes, we can finally turn that email address off.
Right. Well, now it's not costing us anything.
Yes, exactly. Just leave it there. Right.
Because then they have to look for me.
I've got 4 of those right now.
Yeah.
And 2 of them have been gone for 18 months.
I think we have like 20. But that's another discussion for another day. I actually really like Teams and the channel capabilities and the fact that you can put everything about this technology in one channel. Like I implemented Smart Deploy, for example, and I put all my notes in there before I had the ticketing system, that kind of thing. I like that. Biggest challenge for us was AD Connect and making it work and synchronize properly. One thing we found out was with the plan we're on, and I don't know which one specifically, but it doesn't have archiving, it doesn't have the Office Suite software, but it has most every app listed here. We don't have the premium version of Azure AD to be able to do password write back. To where if someone changed their
That gets expensive.
password from the 365 portal, it would write back to your AD. It's just one way. So, and that's not a problem, but we didn't know that until we actually got into the implementation.
It's only another $8 a month per user.
Yeah, that's it. And if I want to add Dynamics 365, what is that, another 15?
That's a lot, yeah.
Yeah.
So I should say that, so we don't use Teams, and the reason we don't use it is because we use Rocket. And we were on Rocket before there was Teams, but we like Rocket a lot. And we actually do hosted Rocket, so we have a number of businesses that all run Rocket. And Rocket's nice because unlimited users and there's just no cost. And so we pay $5 a month for unlimited. And we can connect to any number of companies that we want. We can use it for those live pop-ups on websites for people to get support and go directly to the main system. It's pretty nice.
Are you guys using single sign-on at all with this?
Using what?
Using single sign-on to the portal?
No.
We actually just started rolling that out so you can single sign-on to Outlook, single sign-on to the portal, single sign-on to Teams.
When we
your
have
Active Directory.
single sign-on to the Outlook, it's somewhat because it's every time your password changes, Outlook's going to ask you again, but you just check that box.
Well, right.
It's not technically, I guess, single sign-on. What is that?
So
Nearly.
NSSO.
NSO.
Almost SSO. Okay. Anybody have questions? Feel good about it? Brain fried? Thanks, guys. Appreciate it. All right.
Cut.